This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we're picking up at Sepharia 4:24, but we're actually going to just double back just a couple of lines. Okay, and that is maybe it's 23. I'm not sure, but we'll be at 24 in just a moment. The imbirur emunato, with this clear faith, understanding, recognition. Ki inyano masur el gzerut abore yitbarach, that which our life, that which happens in our life, is given over to God's decree. V'shebichirat habore lo hi habichira tova, and what God is choosing for us is the best possible thing, even though that's always not apparent to us. Hu chayev litgalgel l'sibot to'alatav. Nevertheless, we have to involve ourselves in different means through which our life will go, meaning our health, our livelihood. We have to involve ourselves in different means through which that will come, but recognizing that ultimately it's God who is putting it into that pipeline, and that which comes through our livelihood to us was literally God sent. And we need to choose hatov kanir elo min enyan. One needs to choose that which one thinks will be the best way for them to have their support, the best way for them to take care of themselves health wise. And then God will do through that which he has decreed. And again, so we have to keep focused that it's not our actions that are actually creating this, but it's opening the pathway for Hashem to send his bracha. V'adom elizeh, and that's 4:24. Oh, this can be compared to ki adam, a person. Afal pi shekitzo umidat yamav kishurim b'gzerot haborei. We each have our, hate to say it, our expiry date, right? Like the milk cartons. We have our expiry date that is stamped on our foreheads. Adam, a person. Afal pi shekitzo, even though our final time, the end of our days, umidat yamav, and the measure of how many days we will have, kashurim, that is completely controlled, tied, bigzeirat habori barach, by God's decree. Nevertheless, yesh ala adam litgalgel l'sibot hachayim. Nevertheless, a person we each must involve ourselves in our life, in our health, in doing whatever we can do to give ourselves as many days as we can. B'ma'achal, with that which we eat. Uvemishteh, that which we drink. Uvemalbush, and with our garments, our clothing, taking care of ourselves, keeping ourselves warm, whatever it might be. Uvema'on, and having a proper place to live. Kafi tzarcho, according to our needs. We don't say, hey, I'm going to live as long as I'm going to live, so let me just be cavalier about all of these things regarding my health, regarding that which al pi derech hateva, those things which, according to the natural flow of this world, affect our lives. Sheyomar, don't say, hey, im kadam b'gzeret habore she'echyeh, if God's decree has decreed that I'm supposed to live, yashir nafshi b'gufi mibli mazon kol yemei chayai. Why do I need to bother eating? Right? Let me leave my body without sustenance, without nutrients. V'lo etrach. Why should I bother myself? I won't trouble myself. B'bakashat hateref v'amalo, with all that goes into earning money and providing for my sustenance. V'chein ein roi l'adam lachnis u'sakanot v'bitchono al gzerot habore. Right? A person should not put himself into dangerous, life-threatening situations by having trust on God's decree. If I'm supposed to live, I'll live. V'yishteh samei mavet, and drink soft drinks, soda, sorry, and drink poisonous items, right? Oshisa came batzmo lilachem im ha'ariva chayot, right? I'm gonna jump into the lions then. I'm gonna jump into the right harot lilo dochek. I'm gonna take up alligator wrestling. I think it sounds like a fun thing to do. Hey, as long as I'm supposed to live, I'm gonna live, right? That's not how we look at life. I'm going to jump into the ocean. I'm going to jump into a fire. So the same way that we understand that clearly, even though we don't control how long we're going to live, but we understand, and that is decreed by God, but nevertheless, we need to take the steps to the best of our ability, the best of our knowledge, to ensure our longevity. V'adoma lezeh, mimash ein adam batuach behen, v'yisakein b'nafsho, right? Or to jump into the ocean or fire or anything similar to that, right? From that a person will not be safe, v'yisakein b'nafsho, and put oneself in danger. Now, these things are always changing. The things that we think were terrible, eggs were always great for us. And then eggs were terrible for us because of all the cholesterol. And now eggs are great for us. I remember my cousin telling me that he got such a laugh that, he grew up always, you have to eat liver, Liver's the healthiest thing. And then his mother she's already passed away, my aunt, Allah Shalom. She was by his house and she said, Alan, you don't eat liver, do you? That's terrible for you. So there is always this up and back and up and back, but we've got to go with what science, what our present knowledge says is best, and that's what Hashem expects of us. Meaning, when we keep in mind the same way when it comes to our earnings, to our livelihood, we make the effort, and Hashem will send us what He decides to send, right? But He expects us to do our best. So too, doing our best is following the best medical knowledge, advice, guidance that we have in our day, and that will help us with our health, regardless of what science might decide later on, because ultimately, this is just us making our efforts and Hashem sending what He needs to send. Ukvar hisiranu akasav mizeh, and the pasuk already clearly warns us about that. B'masha, when it says, "Lo tanasu et Hashem Elokechem," do not challenge, do not test Hashem your God, kasher nisitem b'masa, as you tested Him in the place called Masa, ke'enenu nimlat b'zeh me'achad mishnei dvarim. Okay, and because a person who puts himself into a dangerous situation, he will not be saved from that. He can't say, I'll be okay since it wasn't decreed. Someone's ringing the bell. Pardon me 1 second. I'm sorry. Good. And that is because of one of two things. Number one, O sheyamut v'yehu ha'memitet atzmo. A person puts themselves needlessly into a dangerous situation. That person might die, and that's going to be heavenly viewed that this person killed himself. V'hu nitba al zeh, and he will be held accountable for that. Ki'ilu heimit zulato mibnei adam, the same way that if he killed someone else, he'll be responsible for that. He'll also be responsible for himself. Afal pi shemoto al haderech hahu b'gzerat Elokim u'b'shuto. Even though if ultimately he died, then that was God's decree, and that was with God's sanction, but it wasn't for you to bring it upon yourself in such a way, in such a wanton fashion. Ukvar hisiranu, we've already been warned, shlo lahamit shum adam b'shum gilgul, that we can't kill anybody through any means whatsoever. When it says in Shmot, in Exodus, this is the Ten Commandments, lo tirtzach, thou shalt not murder. V'chol asher yiyeh hamumat karov el hamemit, and and to the degree that the person who was killed is close, is a relative, is a close relative of the one who did the killing, onesh yoter ra'ui, then the responsibility and the punishment for that becomes that much greater. As the Pasuk says in Amos, Amos is one of the 12 smaller sized prophets that make up what's called we call the Trei Asar. We have our early prophets and later prophets. The later prophets, we have large books of Yeshayahu, Isaiah, Yechezkel, Ezekiel, and Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah. And then we have 12 other Nevi'im. We call them the Trei Asar, Aramaic for 12. And they are of equal importance, but they are very small. Some of them are all of one perek, one chapter. And therefore they were all combined into one sefer that we call Trei Asar. And one of those is the Navi Amos. And he says, Al Radfo, B'cherev, Achiv, V'shichet Rachamav. You'll be held responsible for running, chasing with a sword after your brother, and you'll be held responsible for v'shichet rachamav, that you have destroyed the normal compassion that a person feels towards a brother, towards a sibling. So we see that the closer the person is, the greater the responsibility, the greater the transgression of the person who would kill, in such a situation. Well, there's no one closer to us than ourselves. So someone who will put oneself into danger and end up dying, onasho gadol, then the responsibility for that is that much greater, b'li safek. I just want to point out, though, it's very interesting. There is an area, there are a few areas where halacha has somewhat gone through some bit of a transformation, right? One of those is smoking on Yom Tov. So when I was a kid, right, we don't smoke on the Sabbath, on Shabbat, but on Yom Tov, as long as you don't ignite the flame and then extinguish the flame, so as long as you don't start the flame, you light your cigarette from an existing flame and you don't pull out the cigarette, then we used to smoke on Yom Tov. Very common in shuls. I don't know in South Africa, but when I was growing up, people were smoking, not in the sanctuary itself, but right outside in the lobby. People were puffing away on Yom Tov. Why was that the halacha? Well, the halacha is on Yom Tov that something that utilizes fire, but doesn't ignite or extinguish, as long as it is food-like, consumption-like, meaning it's something that is shaveh l'chol adam, that everyone does it, so one's allowed to do that. That's why we're allowed to wash with warm water on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, right? Even if it's going to cause water to get cooked up, because that's something that's shaveh l'kol nefesh. So it used to be that smoking was something 4 out of 5 doctors would recommend, right? Nothing like a camel after a meal to help digestion, right? That's what they used to think, or at least that's what they were paid to say by the tobacco companies, and they did say it. Right, so therefore it was all around. Now we recognize that smoking is killing you, is killing yourself and those around you who are smoke, right? So now no one will say you're allowed to smoke on Yom Tov. That's one metamorphosis that we've had in halacha over time. Another one is very, very fascinating, and that is, according to the strict halacha, the person commits suicide, then there's no shiva, the family doesn't really sit shiva, and the person will be buried on the outskirts of the Jewish, if in a Jewish cemetery, on the outskirts of the Jewish cemetery. And I don't know if what's changed is our understanding, or if what's changed is the state of the world. But now, if someone commits suicide, Rahman al-Itzlan, Hashem should have mercy on the family, on the person, right? There's regular shiva, there's a regular funeral, there's a regular burial, it's on the regular part of the cemetery. Now we view it that this person was in a very, very tragic state. And therefore, we don't hold that person responsible for doing what they're doing. Okay? But, I would say when a person is, plans their going away party and invites, so that's already pushing it. But that's how halacha in general, I would say, views it today. But here, what he's talking about is something a little bit different. Here, we're talking about I can, let me go do, let me involve myself in super dangerous activities. Like, I don't want to say skydiving. I think skydiving, right? I'm not interested in doing it, quite honestly. But some of my boys have done it, and they said it was amazing. And it's not. I wouldn't say that is putting your life in danger, right? But super dangerous activities where your life is really on the line. So there, a person should not say, "Hey, if I'm supposed to live, I'll live. If I'm not supposed to live, I won't live." Right? Rather, one must recognize that they might be putting themselves and snuffing out their lives, and that will be their responsibility. Right? We're compared to a servant. Shetzivahu Adonav, Lishmor Makom Lizman Yadua. That our boss has commanded us to guard a certain place for a certain period of time. His hero, and he was warned, Shelo Yiparei Mimenu, that do not leave your guard position Ad sheyavo shliach Adonav elav, until the boss sends a messenger to tell you that now, yes, you can now take off. The person sees that the messenger is late in coming. Nifrad minamakom kodem ba'o. What does he do? See, he goes away. He leaves his post. The katzaf alav adonav, and the boss gets angry with him. Ve'nisha onesh gadol, and he'll be held responsible for that. V'chein hameimit et atzmo. So too, we were given the responsibility. We're put on a mission to guard. What are we supposed to guard? We're supposed to guard ourselves, supposed to guard our lives, supposed to guard our health. Until what point? Until God sends the messenger that says, okay, right, you've done yours, time is up, right? The Malach HaMavis, right? Until that point. And therefore, if we do not properly guard ourselves, and then we have rebelled against this mission that was given to us, so when we put ourselves into sakanat hamavet, into the danger of death. Shmuel, alav shalom. And we find this incredible episode in the Navi, in the prophets, with Shmuel HaNavi. Samuel the prophet. He was told Shaul, King Saul, was the king, but Saul was no longer deserving to be king, and therefore Hashem tells Shmuel Hanavi, Samuel the prophet, go and anoint David to be the king. He's going to take over the role of king in place of Shaul. What does Shmuel say? Ech elech. How can I possibly go and anoint David? V'shama Shaul v'hargeni. Shaul's going to hear about this. He'll kill me. Now, what do you mean? God told you to do it. If God tells you to do it, what are you worried about? God told you to do it. He'll take care of you. Yet, this was not considered a lack of faith in God. When he said, how can I go? Shaul's going to kill me. Rather, God's answer to him was in a manner that shows his zealousness, his carefulness, the care that he was taking in order to make sure he would not be in danger, was mishubachat, was proper, was praiseworthy. What do we find? Va'amar lo, and God said to him, this is how we're going to do it. Eglat bakar tikach biadecha. Take a calf with you. Va'amarta, and you'll say, Lizboach laHashem bati. You'll say, I've come to bring a sacrifice to Hashem. And then you'll call David aside and let him know that and then anoint David. But do it under the cover, under the subterfuge, that it will appear that you're just there bringing a sacrifice. So what do we see? V'shara inyan. V'ilu hayazeh kitzur v'bitchono. Now, if this was something lacking by Shmuel, hayta tshuva elav, then God would have said to him, as we'll soon see, he says in different situations. And this answers a question that I've always had on this. Because the Gemara says this. The Gemara says that we say shluchei mitzvah einan nizoken. Someone who's going to a mitzvah will not be harmed, right? But the Gemara says, but you can't put yourself into a makom sakana. You can't put yourself into a place of danger. And the proof that we bring is from Shmuel. He was a shliach mitzvah. God directly had told him, authorized him, go and anoint David. And yet he was afraid Shaul would find out and kill him. Therefore, it was a makom sakana. It was a place of danger. And therefore, the guarantee that a person on the way to doing a mitzvah and also on the way back will not be harmed didn't apply since it was a makom sakana. So I always thought, well, and that's why God said, well, do it under the cover. So I always thought, I was bothered by this. And I thought to myself, well, I don't understand why that's such a good proof. Maybe because he didn't have the faith, that's why he needed to have the subterfuge. But had he just trusted in God, then that would have been the ideal approach, even though it was a makom sakana. So I always wondered, how does the Gemara see from here that if it's a dangerous place, then you don't have that safety guarantee? Maybe it's only because he wasn't confident. But had he been confident, it would have been fine. But we see here, as he answers my question, because if that was the case, that he shouldn't have asked the question, and God only needed to give him that subterfuge because he didn't trust, but really he should have trusted, then what God would have said to him is, as he said in other places. Let me find in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, Ani amit ve'echyeh. I'm the one who kills. I'm the one who gives life. Machatzti, I'm the one who hits. Va'ani erapeh, I'm the one who heals. If this was an incorrect response of Shmuel showing a lack of faith, then God would have rebuked him and censured him and said, hey, I'm running the show here. I run this world. If I'm sending you to go, then you can be rest assured no harm will befall you. Or similarly, Kamo Sha'amar LaMoshe alav Shalom. Like Hashem said to Moshe, Eight Sha'amar Lo, when Moshe was demurring about being sent to Paro to be the agent to bring us out of Egypt, and he said, I can't go, Hashem. Ki kaved peh, the kaved lashon anochi. I'm heavy of the mouth. I'm heavy of the tongue. I'm the last person you want to send as a spokesman to Paro. What does Hashem say? Mi sam peh la'adam. Who gives a person a mouth? Umi yasumi lame, who makes a person mute? O cheresh, or deaf. O pikeach, or wise. O iver, or blind. Right? That's what God says when someone is hesitant to go on a mission that God sent them on, when they should not be hesitant. But that was not God's response over here. Ve'im Shmuel. So now let's understand. If Shmuel, im tum tzidkato, with his complete righteousness, the super high level, he was one of the greatest prophets that he was on. Lo hekel, he was not light, flippant. Lihikanes besiba ktana mesibot ha sakanot. He was very, very careful not to put himself into even the slightest danger of a dangerous situation. Even though he was going there based on God's direct command to him. Kish'amar, when he said, Malay karnecha shemen, fill up your flask, your horn with oil. V'lech, and go. Eshlachecha, I'm sending you. El Yishai, Beit Halachmi, to the house of Yishai in Beit Lechem. And still he said, God, it's dangerous. And God said, fair enough, do it like this. And God didn't say, hey, I told you to go. What are you worried about? So if even in such a situation, the person, Shmuel Hanavi on his Madrega, was careful not to put himself into any type of dangerous situation, then certainly, Kol Shekain, certainly, Sheyeh Meguna Mizulato, any of us, we have to be very, very careful. Mi bilti mitzvat habore yit Allah. Right? Unless we are commanded by God to do it, we should not put ourselves into a dangerous situation. Okay. Now, right? Certainly our boys, my son, many of our children, your grandson, Carol, right? Are putting themselves into a dangerous situation. There's a war that's going on. But he says, unless we are commanded to do that, right? And when Israel is under attack, then this goes into the category of what's called a milchemet mitzvah. There's a milchama, a war that is reshut, a voluntary war to expand our borders. And there is a milchemet mitzvah, that when those around us are literally attacking and trying to kill us, trying to do what they did on October 7th, not just in the South, but throughout the entire country, that is a milchemet mitzvah that we are on. And that is not a person who is wantonly putting themselves into a dangerous situation. That is a person who is stepping up to do one of the greatest mitzvot possible, and that is to defend our land and defend our people. Okay, so again, if a person is going to put themselves into, excuse me 1 second, someone is davening. Side gate is mikvah. That's not my business. Front gate is davening. That's my business. Side gate, I leave that to Natalie and her crew. Yeah. Okay. So if a person does put themselves wrongly, wantonly into a dangerous situation, so there's one or two possibilities. One possibility is that they will die, right? and they can't say, well, if I died, I was supposed to die. They will be held responsible for being the one who brought that about. All right. Ramban discusses this also in last week's parsha when we had that Avraham had the covenant between the halves, and he was told that your children will be enslaved and that nation will be judged, right? And right, so if it was already that we had to be enslaved, then why would they be judged? Why would they be held responsible? And he goes through there the idea. Elsewhere, also he discusses this idea that if someone, chas v'shalom, heaven forbid, kills someone else, then if that person actually died, then that means that was the time the person was supposed to die. But you were not doing God's will, right? No one sanctioned you. No one ordered you to do that. And therefore, the person who did that murder will be held responsible fully for that. So one possibility is the person will die putting themselves into that danger, and they'll be held responsible, even though in retrospect that was their time, but they were not meant to be the ones to bring it about like that. Or alternatively, lost the place. 1 second. Oh, there it is. Oh, Sheyinatzel. Bezrat Habori Barach. Or God will somewhat miraculously save you from yourself. And the person will be saved. In which case, all's well that ends well, not necessarily. Ve'ye'avdu zuchuyotav. But a person will thus lose some of their merits, meaning that v'yafsid scharo, some of the good that a person has done that's in their positive account, well, there's going to be a major withdrawal from that. Those merits that a person had were now just many of which were utilized, were used up in order to keep this person who was acting foolishly and putting themselves in danger, to keep them alive. As our sages have taught, Zichron Livracha, blessed memory, Bezeh Inyan, Lo'olam, Al Yamod Adam B'makom Sakana. A person should not put themselves into a dangerous situation, life-threatening situation, V'yomar, and say, She'osin lo nes, a miracle will happen. Not a good path to choose. Why? Number one, Shema ein osin lo nes. Maybe the miracle won't happen. And they'll be reading about you in the next day's paper. V'im osin lo nes, and if a miracle does happen, menachin lo mizuchuyotav, then your merits will be decreased. It'll be deducted from the person's account of good that they have done. It has had to withdraw from that account. But Amar Yaakov Avinu, even the great Yaakov, the patriarch Jacob, he said, Katonti mikola chasadim. When he's going to meet up with Esav, he's nervous. Now, why is he so nervous? God had met up with him earlier and said to him, I will be with you. I will guard you wherever you're going to go. So what's he worried about meeting up with Esav now? But he said, Katonti, I have become diminished, small, from all of your kindnesses. And the translation, the Matargim says there, Zeirin zechuvati, my merits have become diminished, mikol chasadin umikol tavavan, from all of the chesed and all the kindness and all the truth that you've done to me. Therefore, granted, you said you will take care of me, but I might no longer be worthy of that guarantee that you made to me. So therefore, we understand when it comes to our life or death, even though that is destined and that is coming from the heavens, nevertheless, we all understand we have to do our very best to keep ourselves living, to keep ourselves healthy in terms of what we eat, what we drink, what we do, we exercise, right? Remember the commercial? and we take Geritol, right? Remember that? Right? Is it still on the market? I don't know. But it's just like ingrained in my head. And take Geritol. Anyhow, yeah. So we know that we have to do whatever it is that we can do, even though it's already destined from the heavens. The same way we say that in terms of life and death. So too that applies to our health, our ongoing health, the hamazon, right, and the food that we ingest, hamabush, and the garments we wear, the hadira, and the manner, right, where we set the temperature in our houses, the midot, hatovot, right, and all of these proper measurements, larchik shekenegdan im birur emunato, even though we understand, we have our birur emunato, even though we have our clear faith and understanding that it's in the hands of God. Nevertheless, we have to make sure that we distance ourselves from those things which will harm us. Ki asibot ein mo'ilot otov b'zeh klum. Right? We recognize that all these things that we're doing, that's not what's going to give us long life or not give us long life. It's all dependent upon God's decree. Kasher yesh lebal adama, the same way that a person who's got a field, what does he need to do? Lacharoshota, he needs to plow it. Clear out the different weeds, the different thorns. Ulazara, and plant it. Ulahashkota, and then to water it. Im lo yizdan lo amayim v'yivtach laborei yitbarach lafroto, right? And then he has his faith in God, lafrota ulashamra min apegayim, that then it will grow, right? But over there it's easy, right? What, a seed, right? A person recognizes a seed is this biological wonder. I put this into the ground, and out from that comes a watermelon. Out from that comes an acacia tree. Out from, right, it's crazy, right? We take it for granted, but it is this biological miracle that happens all the time. So we recognize that with all the things I'm doing, either God's going to make it grow or not. That God will cause it to flower, and to guard it from any harm, the tarbet wasan, to increase the produce, and God will bless it. You can't say, hey, God's doing it anyhow. I'm not going to bother planting. I'm not going to bother plowing or planting or watering or taking care of it. Let it grow. God, take care of it. Let it grow. God doesn't need seeds for it to grow. And that's true. God doesn't need seeds for it to grow. But he's not going to do an open miracle for you. Right? So too, those who are involved in work or business, right? They need to go through to take the steps for their livelihood with their trust that ultimately is coming from Hashem. The sustenance is in God's hand and God's domain. V'shehu arev bo la'adam, and he is the guarantor for a person. Umashlim lo be'ezah siva sheyirtza, and God will give it to us through whichever means He decides. Val yachshov ki asiba to'alio otazikeo mu'uma, but a person shouldn't think that that livelihood is what is bringing me my sustenance. I'm making my effort. I'm doing what I can do. And then, if it's in my best interest, Hashem will send me that which He'll send. And if it's not my best interest, He won't send me. So I need to choose that which I think I can do best in, that which will be meaningful for me. And I can put my heart into it and do a good job of it, right? But ultimately to recognize that the same way when it comes to our life, and the same way when it comes to our health, we make the efforts, but we recognize that it's not really in God's hands. You have cases of people who are so healthy, they're in the midst of their 35-mile bike ride that they do every week, and then they have a heart attack and they die right then and there, or cases of people as they're playing hockey. We hear it all the time. So we need to make our efforts the same way in terms of death, life, and in terms of health. We recognize that we make our efforts, but ultimately it's God. So too in terms of our livelihood. We need to make our efforts. We need to plant, right? In the case of the farmer, and then things can grow. We need, in our businesses, whatever our jobs are, we need to make our efforts, and then it will come. But recognize that ultimately we're just making our efforts and opening up the conduit, the pipeline for Hashem to send it to us. And next week we'll see that a person has to recognize not to get fooled, not to have the delusion that cutting God out of the equation, and this is what's bringing me my sustenance, my wealth, whatever it is that's coming my way. Good. Where are we up to in Sefaria, my friends? 4 what?
Emma?
33.
We're up to 4:33.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Thank you. Good. Okay, I'm running into davening at 6:29. Perfect timing. Okay, everybody. Have a good
Thank you.
evening, a Shavua Tov, and a good week.
A good week.
Thank you.
Thank you.